who the fuck knows what's going to happen? And I feel like it's a great game, and I think it's the best game we've ever made.
Agreed.
But yeah, I don't know what that means, right?
Butterscotch
Shenanigans. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 510 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and I do miscellaneous things.
I'm Sam, and I'm the artiste.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is March 7th, 2020 vibes. Before we get started, we have a warning. Anything could happen in this show, especially swears.
Ooh.
So, be ready for that. There's going to be profanity in this show. And we'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for your recurring donations to help keep the podcast going. So we've got, so many things happening.
Well, also, when people listen to this episode, we are 4 weeks away from launch.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Roughly
5.
Is it 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because months, for some reason, don't have 28 days in them, and nobody can ever explain why. So we are so fucking tired. So we're at the tail end of the beta. We've extended the beta.
Yeah, I would say that we've been putting out patches every day, sometimes multiple times per day, that are so comically extensive because, of course, the whole point we talk a lot about on the podcast is like we've made a lot of tools so that everybody can shove their fingers into this pie, you know what I mean, all at once to fix it, ostensibly. And from map updates to quest updates to creature code, whatever. So it's been very funny because the beta testers done a great job plowing through the game and giving us tons of feedback. And then we've just been spitting out like these 100-bullet patch notes basically every day almost, where Seth can't fit them into Discord because they're going to the text.
I have to keep deciding what to leave out of the patch notes and rephrase so that they are under 4,000 characters to fit in a Discord post, which, it's good. It's a lot.
Yeah. Also, it is 4 weeks in a day, not 5 weeks. I double checked against the calendar. It's
4 weeks.
4 weeks in a day
to launch.
From when this podcast episode goes live.
From when the episode airs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
From now, it's closer to 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So we're just cruising through. The beta's going super good. Yes, we extended it to give people some more time to finish it because, some people have 45 minutes to an hour a day to play or something, and they're just partway through Act 2 at this point. They're definitely not going to finish it unless they kind of go nuts over the weekend. We've had some people who, I think it was last weekend, there was one person who played for 13 hours on Saturday and 14 hours on Sunday.
Yeah.
We've got 2 people who played for over 70 hours during.
Yeah, we got a couple of heroes who are just really giving us lots of good data, and just really kind of, once they're kind of getting past to the end of the game, then they're kind of going back through and doing weird stuff, which is good. One person is trying to pave an entire zone with floors to see what happens.
Really testing our save system.
So there's a lot of cool stuff going on with that. People are really enjoying it. As far as bugs and stuff like that, we're really kind of down to the weird edge case kinds of things that are not super consequential and kind of hard to replicate. There's one in particular that we're digging into, and that's kind of the last big thing to wrap up before launch.
I gotta say that the overall bug and crash rate has been almost comically low. You know what I mean?
We've had 2 crashes, both of which were introduced during the beta. And then we got them immediately figured out what was going on and fixed them the next day.
QA's been doing a great job because again, we put out these patches, but we still do our own internal QA first before they hit beta, and they've caught a few things before we managed to actually hit players with them. But as a result, we really haven't been. It's just so different from the original game. We talk about that beta that was a couple weeks in December of 2015 before the launch of January, and we put out a patch, break some more shit on accident. Ostensibly trying to fix something else, and then it was always just this whack-a-mole thing that went on for months actually post-launch, and this just feels so clean, So again, we still have some of these bugs to iron out, but they're really not very. It's been weird how little of them there are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and there's this like I remember when we finished with the first Crashlands, we were using Workflowy. I'm pretty sure I want to say we had at least 300
Yeah, there were
things
300.
left in Workflowy that were like important things that need to happen for the game to launch, and then we just fucking had to launch it anyway.
It's that sort of like double-edged joke, right? Where like the joke of any game launch or product launch is always like, well, there's a list of all the really important things we just then didn't do. So turns out they weren't important. And there's like, it's simultaneously true and not, because a lot of those still were important, and we suffered the pain in the following, the post-launch weeks of then having to deal with that fact.
Yeah. So like that's kind of where we're at, where we hit our triage list. We punted a bunch of stuff to reevaluate post-launch. And then looking at the current list of things, it's dwindling. And then like the severity of stuff on the list is also shrinking to the point where like the game feels done. Like it's got all the art, it's got all the text. We're in string lock now, where it's like we're not really changing any. We're not adding new dialogue. We're not adding new items and stuff. And so I like personally for myself, like the motivation to keep going through the list of little tiny things.
Oh yeah, it's hard
to keep tweaking. I'm just like, does this even matter at this point?
Yep.
Probably not. But and I think the most important thing for us to do at this point is to just play it. Just because like there's always something. There's always a million things that you could tweak and just keep fiddling with and keep tweaking. But you really just need to instead spend your time playing the game to find those like higher level balance problems or bugs or whatever.
I think the reality though is like we've all played it a bunch now in the past couple weeks, and for me it's more so that I think we're entering a place where we're probably better off not fucking with stuff anymore until post-launch, right?
Because at some point you got to quit touching it, because every time you touch it, there's like
you might break it, or you might shift the experience enough that whatever you felt is not true anymore, and then
there's kind of no such thing as a small change because of how interconnected everything is. So you gotta. If every little tweak, it's like, okay, I got to do a playthrough, basically to like really understand the full consequences of the tweak. And if a playthrough is 70 hours or whatever, then that's
too much. So yeah, we're largely, I think, we're more or less done with like even rearranging insight flow and other stuff to all that.
Yeah, Sam and I had a conversation yesterday where I was like, so I was in my playthrough and I hit this point where I was like, I feel like this research thing could probably come
like a little earlier
after this one. And then we were talking about it for a while, and Sam was like, yeah, but like what happened during your playthrough? I was like, well, I mean, I was just having fun and crafting stuff and doing quests, and it's like, okay, so like did you actually hit a problem? Like, was there actually a bad experience because of this? And I was like, no, I just think it could be better, and it's like, all right, well, fuck it, like let's just not touch it. Let's just leave it alone.
Yeah, because there's always an it could be better, right, for any little thing, and it is that trying to decide that.
But for who?
Yeah, well, it's for who. Yeah, it's the scale of the improvement versus the scale of the sort of broader impact and how much like testing is required to make sure it's fine and all that kind of stuff, right? And that equation starts to get really tight as you get close to launch, because there just isn't time. There's not time to test stuff. There's not time to understand the full implications of a change, and so the impact has to be increasingly large for it to be worth doing, even if it like in a vacuum is worth doing,
Mm-hmm. I will say I got to finally finish my playthrough on Tuesday afternoon, and again they're always kind of funny when when we're doing them, because we're doing them on the clock, so you are trying to finish the fucking thing. You're not quite playing it for that's not 100% playing it for fun, you know what I mean? Because you're like, I gotta go through the shit. So I skipped over a bunch of stuff, especially toward the end.
It's oddly stressful.
It is
to play through a game this big on a time limit, where like that, and also like while you're playing it, you're making changes, and then you have to decide like, does this mean I need to start over? Yep. Like I'm 20 hours in, we've changed several different things. And it's just
I did finish it and cried like a baby right at the end, because I was just like, well, one, like the whole end sequence worked, it like does it just emotionally deliver. We put a lot of energy into that, like that was literally last month, right? We were getting that finished up, and I was just like, geez, we did it. It's done. It's like, it's done. You know what I mean? And like, there's again these little things to finish up, but like it's done, and that's just weird. It's been a long fucking time, so I'm so excited though. I'm so excited for everybody to see it.
Yeah,
I'm also tired of it in a way.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of done, we've hit these various milestones where like it kind of has to be. So someone mentioned were in sort of initial string lock. So there's a little room for like tweaks and stuff up until like 2 weeks before launch, basically. But basically it's effectively done, and it has to be, because we need to start sending keys out to press. And so that's also happening today. As of time of recording this, we're doing there's like multiple rounds of keys that go out to different groups of press and streamers and whatever, depending on like proximity to launch and all kinds of stuff. We rely on our PR team to make those decisions for us, so we don't have to think about it, you know. But that it does to me that keys are literally going out today to press, so that they have enough time to play enough of the game that they can put a review up on the day before launch or the launch day. So the game has to be done enough that we can do that, so that whatever they review is also what we launch, you know, or at least almost exactly. And we currently can't send that out to non-English press because the lag of Loc, right? And so we want to be able to do that as soon as possible, which is why we're going to string lock today, so that we have this final batch of Loc going out next week, kind of on top of the last one that went out, so that we can hopefully be sending out keys to non-English press end of next week or like shortly thereafter. And like we said, that's now 4 weeks before launch, right? So
we're the timing's
we're in.
I know we said it before, but like it always feels like that Wallace and Gromit meme of him riding on the train tracks and just laying the tracks down in front of himself, where it's like, but it kind of has to be that way. It's like, we punted our launch to April 10th because we're like, that's how much time we need. If we look at all the stuff that needs to happen and the order in which it needs to happen, it's not like, it kind of makes me think of like back when the COVID vaccine was going on, they did that Operation Warp Speed, right? Where they were like, normally we have these 3 stages of trials that go sequentially. We're going to do them all at the same time. And if it fails at any point on any one of those, then all of them will stop, right? Which is dangerous, because of course the purpose of doing the trials in sequence is safety,
risk control,
right? It's like if something really bad happens in the early trials with like a mouse or something,
you don't do it.
Like, okay, let's figure that out before, and then fix that, and then do it again before we move ahead, or something like that.
It's a combination of like, is it given what we know about the things that, like in this case, the vaccine, that like make it work, and how dangerous or not dangerous we think those things are, and how dangerous not having it is, right? It's the same idea of like certain kinds of like drug trials and stuff, where normally you have to do a blind trial where somebody is a placebo group and somebody is not. But there's certain scenarios where you can't ethically have a placebo group, because not treating somebody for something that's trying to kill them right now, if the thing might work, you could, but it's it's unethical. So now you have like the science has to be worse so that you can have the ethics be better, right?
So in that case, it was like, normally these things have to happen sequentially. There was a way for them to sort of like pull an emergency ripcord and do them synchronously. In our case, we can't. Like we can't. There's not really a way for us to like do the beta test before the game is done, or translate after launch, or whatever. Like,
it's like how if you want to create a human baby, you can't just add more.
It's just gonna take 9 months.
It just takes 9 months.
You got to go through the stages of development. And so in our case, it's like, if we, for example, gave ourselves until, I don't know, November or something, then all that would happen is we would blow up the scope of the game more, and end up right back where we started, which is still coming down to the wire,
you're always going to come down
still translating and testing right at the end,
Well, because the reality is you don't actually want there to be a very large gap between you being done and the game being launched.
Yeah, because that meant you're just spending money,
just burning money.
So you want to be as tight as possible. Ideally, it's like literally a day of. It's like, we're finished and the game's launched. With the
timeline that we have, like we actually have more sort of comfort than I was expecting us to have in terms of the stuff we still need to be doing, because certain things like the beta test and string lock and that kind of stuff, like just have to happen some significant time before launch, because otherwise it can't possibly get done. Like the whole project can't. But I was expecting there to be more like, okay, there's these other systems that don't necessarily need to go through beta, don't require Loc, like that kind of stuff that we have to like really shore up still, because you then take that kind of stuff that isn't stuck behind things like a beta test and Loc, and you try to basically put that at the very end then, right? but all that stuff is done, right? Like it's all
Well,
good. So we
reality
actually
is-
are pretty comfortable.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about our strategy, our overall strategy with Crashlands too, which was like first was the kind of the appeal and marketing focused build out to start it. So it was like make a game that looks like something you want to get, right? Even before we had much of the game there. Then it was we did that alpha, years ago now, 2 Octobers ago, I guess. And or no, was that? Yeah, it'd be 2023.
It was 2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, October 2023.
Yep. So that alpha was basically proof of the whole recipe working, like all the systems working. And then we built the whole
Well,
rest.
there's also proof of a lot of things that didn't work. Which
Oh yeah.
I do
But I'm
want to
saying,
talk
like-
about it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm saying that like really large systemic change should really not be what's happening in a beta context.
Yeah, we needed the alpha to identify like the big change that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, beta is refinements and streamline. Alpha is what's not working at all.
Yes.
What's working? How do we adjust? So something that I think we've like leaned in to a lot more during like leading up to the beta and then during the beta as we made changes is how do I put this? Being less stingy with player power.
Mhm.
So in the alpha, one of the things that we started seeing was like people were talking about like harvesting being tedious, combat being tedious. Like it feels like everything's just taking way too long and it's like way too hard.
It was kind of
and
the word we were so afraid of from original Crashlands was grindy. We were like, we don't want to see that word again with Crashlands 2. And then we did. We saw it in the alpha.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about balance and how like we mentioned this thing like last week's episode about how like you could have the same exact game concept, but how you tune the knobs completely changes the experience. And what we kind of have discovered over time was that like we had like in Crashlands 2 we have telegraphs that you use to capture targets. You're swinging your tool or your axe or whatever. And back in the alpha, the telegraphs were very small compared to what they are right now.
Yeah. Almost all of them have been approximately doubled.
Like doubled at least.
Not even it's all weapons, all harvesting tools, and that's from the jump, right? And part of it is like you have to do this thing where you're thinking about an RPG or like power curve, where you're trying to say, okay, where do you want the player to start off kind of weak so that they feel the power gain that they're getting, right? And one of the ideas we had early on with Crashlands 2 is the idea that we're going to basically incrementally increase the size of those telegraphs, basically make it so it's easier to catch stuff, in your codes of attack via some upgrades, whatever else. And so they naturally all started very small.
It's kind of like starting with like shitty looking rags on your character
Exactly.
at the start of the game, and then you get cool looking armor later.
Yeah. So
like
and
that.
there's all the learning stuff. So like early game for any game typically is like it's less less dazzling than it will be at the end because you're not ready mentally to handle that. So that was like the line of reasoning there. But what's been interesting, I think, both in the week before the beta and then just the beta itself is like I think we've largely gotten to that point. It's not about player power, but it's just like recognizing what's fun about the game and just turning that knob up. So it's like it's fun. The whole reason we did the telegraph thing for harvesting was because it actually does make harvesting into a little interesting, like just a much more interesting little mini game where you're positioning your character. But if a telegraph
you
is too
see
small,
a cluster of plants, and you're like, I think I can catch those in my telegraph, right? And like you go stand in position, and then you can catch all three of them in one swing, and it's
it's like just slightly interactive enough compared to punching a tree, like singularly punching one tree, that it makes it not grindy feeling, right? But that's only true if the telegraph is big enough to allow you.
If the
to
telegraph is so small that you're effectively single target chopping stuff anyway, then they might as well not even have the telegraph.
Exactly. So it's basically, I think we did a good job. One of the questions we asked before from our internal QA, they did their playthroughs a few weeks ago. And I said, if you could just wave a magic wand and like have a change be there to make the game just more enjoyable for you, what would it be? And it's just like, it's a super good guiding question because it lets you usually get at some of those just fundamental player things like, oh, it'd be nice if I just like moved faster. Like I'm just slow, or like I just, harvesting just wasn't super interesting. It'd be nice if that was more interesting. It'd be as vague as that or specific or something else, right? And also then asking even like just between Adam and Seth and I, like, okay, what do we, given how the game is structured, what can you just guess off like the initial launch of the game is going to be a player complaint, right?
Yeah.
As in a
And
common player complaint, like the one we see over and over and over again.
And can we just fucking not have that be a complaint? That's essentially like a lot of the stuff in the beta. And it's like, okay, yeah, if you just increase the telegraph size for something like harvesting, it's just way more fun and interesting. Baseline. It's better for us. It's better for everybody else. So there's been a lot of those things that have been like those. They're not systemic changes, right? In the case of like the alpha, where it's like literally you got to like rip out some stuff and rearrange.
It's not like we got rid of telegraphs.
Correct.
We just changed how we were thinking about them.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like the problem is if you're using a telegraph as a means of giving the player power by making the telegraph bigger, then if you start it small, then it just fucking sucks. It's not the same as like a number getting bigger where you're just like, I did more damage, right? It mechanically changes how you can interact with the world.
Yeah.
And even just stuff like in combat, if your telegraph is bigger, then it's easier for you to hit enemies while not standing in their telegraphs, right? If your telegraph is super short, then you have to risk yourself and put yourself in harm's way because you got to get closer to the enemy, right? And so eventually we hit a point where we're just like, never mind, telegraphs are just going to be useful and fun and big and cool right out of the get-go, and we will give the player power in
Well, I
other
think it's similar to like
ways,
how we do the sort of the difficulty modes, right? Where it's not that every aspect of everything changes. It's not that telegraphs are smaller or bigger or things are do more damage and take more damage. Like all we did was just change like things are faster.
Change some speeds.
Yeah, just change some speeds. Like again, identifying the part that actually like represents the interesting and fun part of the challenge and tweaking that rather than everything else. Because I think this idea of like, because we still could have had it so that also telegraphs tend to get bigger as the game progresses to like give you more power and stuff, right? But the starting point has to also be good.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Along the trajectory,
and in some
right?
cases they do. So like what we did, for example, for the chopper that you'll notice when you play the game is that like it basically just gets like a bit wider. Like it's kind of like an arc in front of you. And so it just becomes, but it starts pretty big.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it just
starts good too,
spreads
and
more,
then get better, right?
Yeah.
And then even just stuff like just this past week, we took we did kind of like an audit of some of the items that are like came kind of late in the game, and we're like, can we shuffle things around so that you can just have these things sooner?
Yeah. Is it really a problem to not have them at the beginning? You know?
Yeah, just because.
It's more fun.
If you get if you get these things early, then it's just more fun things to play with. And like back when I did my first playthrough, which was now probably 2 months ago or something like that, we had like a lot of these trinkets that were just stat stick trinkets. Basically, it's just like, oh yeah, this one just like gives you haste, but that's what it does. And then alternatively, we have these interesting trinkets that are like, oh yeah, like when you get hit, you poison the enemy.
Yeah,
or
synergistic trinkets.
Yeah, when you deal fire damage, sometimes you go crazy, stuff like that. And I found myself completely ignoring the stat stick trinkets.
Yeah, I did too.
Because I'm like, who gives a shit? Like, give me something cool. Like, give me this thing that like, your poison sometimes makes more poison, and then I just roll poison like crazy. Like that's interesting, right? And so Sam and I had a conversation. I think it was like right before the start of the weekend before the start of the beta.
Yep.
I was like, I want to rip these out. I want to rip out these stat stick trinkets and just put in some cool effects on them instead.
I think that was also while, because there were a lot of, I think most trinkets even weren't in the set system, because the set system is the whole idea of like you get multiple items in the same set, then you get a set bonus that adds on top whatever you're doing.
Most of the trinkets it's just that we basically created on purpose a whole group of them that were just supposed to be statistics. The idea being that like they're still useful, depending on the build. But it turns out that like being useful, but in a not interesting way, they're not as interesting. If that makes sense. Synergies are naturally just
it's like, number go up, like, oh yeah, this trinket gives me more electric damage.
Yeah,
which is like fine.
It's like, but this one makes it so I explode when I juke.
Yeah, so who gives a shit about this other one?
Yeah, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, so we went through and just looked at every single one of those stat stick trinkets, put them into sets, and got rid of their passive effects and gave them new interesting effects. One of my favorite ones is like pretty hard to use. It's called the self motivator. Mm-hmm. And originally it was just like, it gives you some run speed. That's it. That's just what it did. Now it does a thing where whenever you kill an enemy, you get a stack of motivation, and you can get 15 stacks of motivation, and every stack gives you haste and juke recovery. Juke recovery is your ability to like, it's like
Dodge
how,
roll.
it's the cooldown of your dodge, basically. So whenever you kill an enemy, you get motivated. And if you take any direct hit at all, you'll lose all your stacks.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now like an early
very
game
fun.
item.
I use it now just because once
Yeah.
it gets going and you're just like a fucking machine gun.
Because it
with
gives
your-
you a lot of haste.
Yeah,
It gives
it's
you a
fun.
shitload of haste.
It also gives you a
but-
great. It's a great tension builder, right? Early game.
Yep.
It makes it big and it makes combat really interesting, right? Early game.
Yeah, because it's like it's this little mini game of like get as many kills as you can, or you'll see a group of small enemies where normally you'd be like, I don't give a shit, like I don't need any loot from them, whatever. But then you're like, but I could just wipe
Get
them
my
out real
stacks up.
quick and get some motivation stacks.
Yeah, because the motivation it doesn't time out, right? It just hangs
It
out.
lasts for like 2 minutes,
Okay,
so it's kind of like you get quite a bit of leeway with it. And so like that, but like having that much haste and having an item like that early in the game is very different vibes wise from what we had before. It's very easy early game if you figure out good combinations of items, if you explore a lot, if you go find some of the hidden things that are around in the first act, you can get pretty strong pretty early.
Yeah.
And
Basically,
then from
what's
there,
happening
your
previously-
options.
Yeah. What was happening previously was like Act 1 was more or less like the whole act we kind of considered training, right? Where it's like by the end of it, you have like a full set that you could put together, whatever. But there's not like a lot going on the combat side.
Not a lot of diversity of options
Choices.
for.
Yeah. And so now it's like we pulled enough of those things forward, then not just like making entirely new ones, which we did right before the beta, but also just this last week, we pulled a few of the things that they were coming late game, which of course, like there's still cool stuff to unlock late game. But the problem with late game stuff is that, of course, you don't get to
You
use
don't
it
have
very
time to
long.
use it.
So we're like, fuck
Yeah.
it, let's just pull a few of those forward. We'll shuffle some things around. And so now you get like one of my favorite gadgets, like very early, just by like walking over to it, right? In the mantle.
You just go pick it up. It's just laying there.
And
on
it's
the
like,
ground.
it's flashy as fuck. It's fun to play with. And
Well, then it adds the element for the variety of kinds of players that exist in a real, because like betas are not the same as real launch, right? But one of the big reasons is because people don't have the internet to turn to when they were like, how do I like really crush the first act, that kind of thing. But now you get that combination where the game allows you as a player to discover like kind of out of balance stuff and reward you for just like covering every square inch of the land, right? So for people who love that playstyle, like finding all the Easter eggs and all the fun stuff, you're gonna find some shit that like you're like, holy shit, this is cool, right? That changes how you think about how combat works, makes you a little overpowered even for a while. Like it does that stuff. If you're somebody who's just like, I want to do like the most intense, fun, like out of balance stuff as quickly as possible, you can go check the internet and be like, where do I go to get all that stuff? And it's there. You don't have to wait for 10 hours to get it,
Yeah, I think now in Act 1 there's I don't want to say exactly how many, but there's a healthy handful of items that you can just go get. You can just go find.
Well, I think the
if you
fun
know
thing
where they
about-
are, you can just go grab them.
Yeah. But I also like the design change of like being like, we're introducing the concepts of combat to you in Act 1 and we kind of like pace it out and are mostly focusing on just kind of almost just the idea of combat, And then later come like all the fun, like trinket, weird gadget stuff, right? But instead now it's like, oh no, actually you get glimpses of that, significant glimpses of that earlier. But what comes later is like really being able to act on sets. Because at the
the deeper
beginning, there's not
because you
enough
get
of it
more
to-
and more items.
yeah, because you can't really
of
assemble
certain
all your
types.
sets yet at the beginning, and you only have partial sets for everything. And then as you go, you start making decisions like, because now you've seen everything in action already, like to some extent. And then you start deciding like, ooh, I'm going to go on and fire or whatever. And so even though we're giving you some of that stuff earlier, the way that the player's going to end up approaching it is fundamentally different between Act 1 and Act 2.
again, I think a lot of the focus on the beta is it's a combination of saying, okay, it's confirmation that this fucking game works, right? But then also it's looking, especially, we always talk about early game stuff, right? Especially at like drop off rates and stuff like that. And Crashlands 2, at least in the beta context, is performing well above Crashlands 1 on that, like on those metrics. So that's like how many players are still left after 1 hour, right? 2 hours, 5 hours. It's doing very well compared to the original. And which
Well,
is
the
really
funny
exciting.
thing is that that's just looking at Steam metrics, and we explicitly tried to find testers who have multiple devices,
Yes.
right? And so the Steam metrics for the beta are far outperforming original Crashlands, But
Even
that's with
though-
a subset of people who are purposely splitting their time between Steam and other platforms.
Yeah, I mean, their
which is
total playtime
interesting.
in the game, right, is not
Is more than
actually
that.
being
It's not-
captured on Steam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to say though, like I feel very good about the game in terms of all the changes we made. It's just getting more and more fun. We're getting a good response from the testers, both like anecdotally and also in the data. However, because of how things went down with Levelhead,
Oh yeah, same.
I now have this thing in the back of my mind where I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
You know, where I'm
What
like,
if it doesn't
Does
matter?
it even
That's good.
matter? Yeah.
yeah, I've played through this game now several times, and it's actually hit a point where, like, up until recently, Baldur's Gate 3 was kind of my, like, I got an evening to chill out. I'm gonna boot up Baldur's Gate and just kind of play. That I've tried that a couple of nights these past couple of weeks, and then I ended up just going back and playing Crashlands 2.
Yeah, actually, yeah,
'cause
Sam,
I'm-
on that note, because you finished your playthrough that you had to do to like
Yeah.
get through the whole game. I started my second playthrough because Seth's been doing a lot of like restarts. I started my second playthrough beginning of last week, and of course, there's also been a fuckload of changes that have happened to make the game better. But I don't think that was the main reason why I was having like twice as much fun the whole time that I was playing. Like, and I was similarly like I was still kind of doing it because I felt like I should keep doing playthroughs. I'm going to keep on doing that, but that was pretty nominal. It was mostly because I was like, I get to spend my work time, you know,
You're just enjoying it. Yeah.
just like playing this game, and this game is
yeah.
actually very fun.
Well, I finished it, and I ran a particular set combo for basically the whole game. I ran the Void or the Arbiter set. And so I finished it, and I was fully expecting, because again, like, we work on this fucking thing for 4.5 years. So my internal expectation was like, once I do my like official playthrough, that I'm probably going to be like very over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm done with this
Yeah,
game.
but immediately I was like, well,
Yeah, exactly.
what
I
if we ran,
literally
like a Slayer
immediately,
comp though.
the moment I finished my playthrough, I was starting to think about my next one. The moment.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah,
I mean,
so
again, good
But
signal.
again, like, yeah, and so, but because of the unpredictability of the games market, like I
Can't trust anything, man.
I'm optimistic, but of course I'm worried just because, like,
It could end up being the last game we make, you know.
yeah, who the fuck knows what's gonna happen? And I feel like it's a great game, and I think it's the best game we've ever made.
Agreed.
But yeah, I don't know what that means, right?
Yeah,
Could mean nothing, and that's the brutal part, right?
yeah, my take on it is like from sort of like as a creator and artist sort of standpoint, that we absolutely made a thing that was worth making. And no matter what the outcome is, I'm glad we made it, and I'm glad we took the time required and spent the money required to do it. And it might just also be true from a business standpoint, given
that it doesn't pan out.
that doesn't
somehow.
pan out. And if Crashlands 2 is the game that we end up sinking the ship on, honestly, I'm really glad it was that one, because if it
What a way to go!
we wouldn't, because the thing is, like, if Crashlands 2 can't succeed, we cannot be successful. That's, in my opinion. I don't think there's a way. There's not a thing we could have done instead. There's not a game we could do next, you know, that like is the thing that was like, oh, it was because we didn't make a game in this genre. Like, it's some bullshit, right?
Right.
It's just that the game's market is impossible to intentionally succeed in, right?
Well, yeah, I'm actually more worried about the middle case.
Yeah, no,
you
I
know,
agree. Yeah,
of
that's-
like, where like if it goes gangbusters, it's like, hell yeah, that was the right move.
Yeah.
If it completely flops, it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah, we gotta
like
pivot.
that's a clear signal.
Yep.
If we land in the middle,
You don't want to be
Well, because then
on a
what's
treadmill.
next?
I
I
mean,
think it's
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
because it
not
doesn't
even a
give you
treadmill.
data.
It's that if we had to put this much effort in and make this good of a thing to just not go under,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Then what does that mean the next thing has to be? Because that means the next thing has to be, to keep us from going under, has to be at least.
well, it's
as
not
good.
about.
you
Well,
know?
no, it's not about quality though.
Yeah, that's
You know,
it's about
it's about meeting the market with something
Yeah, sure.
that people want.
But this is also the best we know to do to meet the market. So, like, if we can't,
Well, there is one thing, but I feel like there's a sort of big survivorship bias on it, which is multiplayer, right? Because like if you look at a lot of the games that really kind of like go gangbusters, right? It's like you got Pal World, you got Hell Divers, you got you know.
Well, I think multiplayer unlocks the next tier of it unlocks the next tier of like the ceiling of success, right?
right.
but it does jack shit to the floor.
Correct.
Of puzzles.
In fact, well, it creates a negative feedback loop as well as a positive one, right? And so
Because it can't
if you
stand
make
alone for like the handful of players who like it, basically.
I think about like
Yeah.
if Crashlands 2 doesn't do well enough for us, it's less so. I think it's more so just saying that it just means we need to re-examine our approach about how we choose what we're building.
Yeah.
well, there's also there's a cost benefit question, right? Because like Crashlands 2 took over 4 years to make, a huge portion of that was tools development.
Yeah.
Like about half of it was developing stuff that would make it possible to make a game of this scope. And like we were talking about, when we went into the alpha in October 2023, we still only had the first 1/3 of the game. And that was actually true until January of 2024, when we started working on Act 2, right? So we basically built 2/3 of the game
In the last
at least
year and a quarter,
in the
basically.
last year. And the first 3 years was the first 1/3 of the game.
Yes.
Which is how almost all game development ever works, right? It's always that like seemingly out of balance thing of like the first huge fraction of it is figuring out how to make it, figuring out the design, figuring out all this kind of stuff. And then a mad rush, now that all that stuff is figured out,
Yep.
to then
Put
build
enough stuff in it
to
make
put
it
it all
work.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always
Yeah,
how it
so-
works. But the relative like proportions of those, how long the overall thing takes, all that kind of stuff, dramatically depends on all the decisions that we make about what is this thing that we're trying to make in the first place.
But I think,
Yeah.
I
So the
think
thing is, like, Crashlands 2 may not do well enough to warrant 4 years, right?
right.
Yeah. Yep.
But now that we have the tools, if we could make a game like Crashlands 2 in 2 years,
Or even 3 years.
which is completely feasible, then it might actually be extremely profitable, right? Because again, like, it's a cost benefit.
Yeah, but yeah, if the game does mediumly, right, and then we throw all the stuff away that we learned to make
just
it-
do something
and
else.
just do something else, like we're just fucked, right? That's kind of what happens there. So
Yeah.
I agree that the middle path is still feasible, given again, we're always saying take the long view, right? Which is like you're saying, to make Crashlands 2, we made all these decisions because we were trying to make Crashlands 2, which required so much stuff to do. But we then did all of that stuff with an eye towards the future of being like, well, we need
What do
it
we
to
do
be
next?
easy to add content to games, specific for Crashlands 2. Yeah, sure, right? But the system that we built is not inextricably tied into what Crashlands 2 is, right? It's a more generic conceptual way of thinking about it. Same deal with most of the tools that we develop. They're just kind of like live alongside the game. Coupled to it certainly in a way, but in a way that's extractable so that we can bring that stuff forward. And honestly, because of how big Crashlands 2 was, they'll work a lot better in like almost any other game, whatever the next game is, because they won't have to.
If we made like a roguelike or something.
Yeah, they
as the
won't have to
next game, it's
sustain the sheer volume that they have to for Crashlands 2.
Yeah, and I mean, I know for a lot of game developers, there's like an imposter syndrome thing where they're like, oh, everybody else is so much better than me. I'm just faking it. I don't really know what I'm doing. That kind of stuff. That's not where I'm at with any of this. It's more I have extreme confidence in our ability to make a really good game, and we did that, and we've been doing that. But I have no confidence in my ability to predict how that will now correlate to some kind of an outcome.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like we'll never get to have that. That's not.
Yeah.
We'll never get to have that. You never get to know.
You never get to be like, this is going to do great. Like, you just can't
I do
say
think
that
part of
because you
our-
don't know.
Part of the learning though too is like is on it. Like we've gotten better at engineering, we've gotten better at design, and I do think with Crashlands 2, with the approach we're taking to it too, we have gotten better at the appeal approach, like trying to make a game that's very appealing, right? From a lot of those high level decisions.
Yeah.
And so, because it's not really about making a quote unquote good, or you have to extend your idea of what makes a good game, really, which is like it's not really just the mechanics, it's not the art, it's the combination of everything that makes it so it's an appealing thing that the market actually wants.
It's more like make a successful game versus a good game, right? Because there's even stuff like over the course of the next 5 weeks, I wouldn't say likely, but it's becoming more likely that countries who, we've localized the game to be able to sell it in those countries are pissed off at the United States by that point, and something happens where there's a boycott of all American made products, right? Like that's happening. Typically people think about this in terms of physical products and stuff like that. But there's a chance that we get caught in the grinder on that, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that can happen.
And there's always been, because our biggest market for Crashlands is China.
It's China.
China. Mm-hmm. And so we've always been operating under a risk that at any time China can be like, you know what, we've been kind of letting Steam slip through here, but we're not going to anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And so we've always been operating under that risk, but it is definitely the case right now that risk is much greater than it has been in recent history. And so so we're like it's one of the dark jokes that I'm now finding myself making is like, well, if money still exists when we launch the game, I think it's going to go well. And that's kind of where we're at. But it is absolutely the case that through no fault of our own, having spent 4.5 years of our lives and our team's lives creating this thing that we know is really good, it could end up because of the
market conditions,
world political
geopolitical
situation,
problems.
Yeah, that now we can't fucking sell it, and we have to go, and now we can't sell anything even because if that's the world we find ourselves in when we launch this game. It doesn't matter what we're doing, right? There's
we and many people are in trouble, and then we got to figure some things out.
Yep.
So it's.
I think we've also got this thing. Our PR team has been compiling this list of all these reviewers and stuff who have expressed interest in it, right? And it's a big list, which is great. Certainly, a level hits list I don't think even existed. Frankly.
Yeah, there was nobody, literally nobody.
I don't know if we mentioned this on the podcast. We joke about internally sometimes how like Levelhead doesn't have a Metacritic score because we couldn't get four reviewers to play it, like, which is right. And it has like 97% positive on Steam, and we couldn't get 4 professional reviewers to play the game. Like,
it's just nuts. So like again, as far as we talked a lot about looking at the data, the beta feedback and stuff, and being like, are we getting positive signals? Are we getting negative signals? And then trying to guess the trajectory of stuff based on that. And it's kind of the same with the press, which is like we've gotten a lot of interest, right, from press outlets and from big press outlets, which is great. It's still not, of course, anything yet because you still got to see if they actually produce anything. So there's that next hurdle to get over.
Well, and we're in the situation where we're talking, like we were mentioned earlier in the episode, about how there's like this one last weird bug that we're tracking down. It's in there, and we're sending out keys today, and.
We'll just have to let them know. Just be like, P.S.
Yeah, and the way that this bug manifests is like it doesn't break the game in a way that's obvious, but it does have unusual consequences that can be confusing if it happens. And so then it's like, well, if a reviewer hits this bug, they won't know that they've hit it. It's just that stuff will
just be a little less good. Right.
Some specific things will be weird, and then we have to we have to weigh the decision right now of like, do we, now that we've figured out that this bug is there, which we figured out like yesterday, do we just go ahead and send it? And we're just going to send it. We're sending it out because like even internally, like we've had, like I've played hundreds of hours of the game. Our QA has played for thousands of hours. We've had 100 people going through the beta, and they're putting dozens and dozens of hours each into the game. And nobody outside of our internal team has picked up on this bug.
Yeah. And not until this past 2 weeks, I think, during full playthroughs.
I saw it last week for the first time. And
Sam saw it.
Started talking about it.
Jen saw it, and I think that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, neither of you guys have actually seen it.
I haven't seen it,
which is crazy to me because it feels like it happens relatively.
But also, it is one of those. It's a subtle enough thing that it's one of those that like
you don't even know.
It's definitely happened to more people, given that it could happen twice. It's definitely happened to more people, but you would have to notice it, and if you like restart the game or whatever, right, then the issue goes away. So it's definitely extremely rare, and it's hard to notice. And so it's living in that space of like, we actually don't know how common it is, except that it's definitely uncommon. But we don't know, is it like literally as uncommon as the evidence says, which is it's happened twice in literally thousands and thousands of hours of playtime? Or is it actually happening like
all the time,
tens of times or even more often?
Yeah, is there like a 10% chance per hour that it happens, or is there a 1 in 1,000 chance per hour? Of
we don't know
happens?
Because of the nature, which is like these are the bugs I hate the most, is the ones where you're just like, because
I do not like them, but also like the reality is like the impact of it is negligible on the play experience. Is sort of the takeaway to me. Like it can make some stuff confusing, or it can like kind of break some stuff, but we've got enough workarounds. We've got like there's enough padding in there that it's not. You literally cannot even notice it happening.
I think the thing that sucks, what it does specifically, or like that a person would notice, or I guess not notice, is that in Crashlands 2, in the dialogue system, we have the ability to have a dialogue line actually just be a little emoji, right? So that, and so we like pepper that throughout quest dialogue and stuff, where like characters talking to each other, and then we just
they're reacting basically.
They'll react.
It's our version of in an Indian soap opera when somebody says something and then the camera zooms in really hard on somebody else's face while they overly enthusiastically emote. It's like that.
And it's delightful, and it also helps, like it sets some tone things, and also helps you understand what's going on. But I think to me, the main thought is there's the charming the charm aspect of it. That if somebody does manage to hit this really early, and we have no evidence that somebody could even hit it early, based on our understanding of it, it seems even more unlikely than a lot more likely than hitting it later, right? But if they never even saw that system, that's the part to me where I'd be like, that does fuck with like their perception of what the game is.
Well, and the other thing is that when this bug happens, for the remainder of your play session, characters will not properly look at each other when they're in conversation.
So it just kind of like fucks with your perception.
It's just there's just jank. There's a little bit of jank where it just doesn't feel quite right, you know? And of course, like if we're talking about, if let's say this bug is still present when the game launches and you get 1,000 reviews come in and like 5 people saw that bug, but they didn't notice, they didn't care or whatever, right? Or even if they did notice and then they're like, you know what, the game was great, except sometimes characters didn't look at each other, thumbs down, right? Like for the people who cared about that, their review score would be diffused out across all the rest of the player base, right? But when we're talking about sending it out to a small number of press and YouTubers,
you want it to be perfect. That's the problem, right? When you send it to people, it's just hard. It's really hard.
Because they have an outsized impact on people's perception of the game.
And of course,
their specific experience has an outsized impact on people's understanding of the whole experience.
Yeah. Because if the dice roll just lands a certain way, like if you get 10 professional reviewers to review your game and one of them hits this bug, right? Then it's like, well, there goes 10% of your if they notice and care, right?
That's the other thing that's like so fucking annoying about this bug, is that it's extremely rare, hard to notice, but also it's not the kind that just like sometimes happens, whatever. It's the kind that when it happens, the game is now flipped into broken mode, where it's like that.
It'll just be like that for all your quests until you reload. And
so if you don't notice it, which again you wouldn't, if you don't realize what's going on, and then also realize, I can just like restart and then I'll be fixed, right? Then you go through an extended play session. Then like you just have like a degraded experience the whole time, but you don't know that that's happening. You know, like that's just.
And the thing is, like, there's an easy workaround that I could just throw in there that would fix it post hoc, right? Which would just be like, hey, like whenever you open the in-game menu, we'll just destroy all the quest objects that are laying around, right? That'd be easy.
Because if they're not supposed to exist, right? If you can identify a point where it's not supposed to be happening, definitely.
Yeah, then I can just brute force.
Honestly,
we should do that if we know that has no side effects.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's a complicated game, right? Yeah, that's the thing is like I could do that, but the problem is not knowing the source, right?
Yeah.
Because digging through the code and trying to be like, what are all the possible combinations of scenarios?
Yeah, just how is this happening?
Because like way back in the day, our means of fixing bugs was like, I'm not sure why that's happening. Let me just add something to the end of it, right? Which is like we had in the original Crashlands, we had a deborking step of loading into gameplay that would literally just look for the consequences of certain bugs that we knew about and just try to undo them.
Yeah, this is one of those things that I feel like a software engineer, like on occasion has to do, but any one of them will mock you relentlessly. Like anytime you make a decision like this, where you're like, I just can't fucking figure it out. So here's my.
Well, again, it's like the COVID vaccine, right? Where
Yeah.
you're just like, okay, if the game, hypothetically, game's coming out in 3 days. I got this list of things to fix. I could take the whole day trying to find where this bug is happening.
It's still
and then
potentially
stop
not
at the
finding.
source. And I may be wrong, right?
Yeah.
But I do know that whenever the bug happens, this one specific outcome occurs. So if I just stop that outcome, guaranteed,
Well, it seems like
then I can move on and we can get the game out.
Actually, I think-
it's a fail safe, right? To me,
It's a fail.
I think there's an even cleaner failsafe, but we'll talk about that offline.
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll just say that the beta's gone well. We're on the tail end of it. We'll talk more about kind of the wrap up numbers, I think, next week. Once it finishes, it'll finish on Monday. We just got a few more things. Just a few more things to knock out.
Yeah, we're entering into the tenuous sending out lots of keys and then hoping nobody breaks an embargo.
Yeah, that's my next anxiety.
and
is that one.
hoping the game doesn't get leaked and hoping because there's a lot of trust that happens at this stage where like you put 4 years of your life into something and then you just gotta start handing it out to people and hope that everything goes well.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the interesting things too about the current state of the games, of the industry around game development. So like the
streamers, the YouTubers,
the streamer
press.
YouTube. I'll just kind of lump that into the press side, but like visibility of a title external to the game itself, which has been the deprofessionalization of it, right? Because like in the very early days of games, like you'd open up a physical magazine that you bought, right, to like learn about what games are coming out and stuff. And then later on with more internet stuff, right, then there would be like websites that made money and paid journalists to research and write about these things, right? And then that was where you got your news, or bloggers that you liked. But either way, like kind of trusted entities that did this basically for a job, that you could count on being like, yeah, they know what an embargo is. They understand why it's really important, right? And so they'll respect an embargo, like all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of switched over to, and I don't mean this in any kind of like a derogatory way, but it's switched into just a non-professional sort of context where most of the visibility comes from streamers and people who are doing still, like they're doing their thing as a job, but it's not the same as doing games journalism as a job, right?
Correct.
They're sort of doing games journalism as like a feature of their job, right? And some of them, especially the ones that have been around longer and stuff, like
They become more professional over time.
yeah, they become more professional over time, but their like popularity and their access to viewers and all that kind of stuff is completely decoupled from how recently they've gotten into the business and how professional they are and all that kind of stuff. And so many of them just don't even know about this kind of stuff, right? So you end up in this weird territory where we're like, okay, we need to start sending things to people with embargo dates and whatever. But you're like, but do we know if these people, like,
Can you
any
trust
of
them?
the specific people will even like understand that this matters, right? Or if we say, please, like, we want to limit, pre-launch game content if you're streaming or whatever to like the first X hours or whatever like that, right? Will they, if they're in the middle of a day-long stream, will they give a shit? Will they just blow past that? Just keep going? Because they got other stuff that they care about, and the what we want to happen is not necessarily top of mind, right?
Yeah, well, it's basically just a social contract, right? Which is that if we send out a game with an embargo, which just means like you don't publish your stuff about the game until this date. If somebody breaks the embargo, then that person is kind of now suspect, right? So like other games will now be more hesitant to send their codes to this person who broke the embargo because that kind of gets talked about. And so it's really just like a social reinforcement mechanism that's built on trust and sort of like
Community
getting
standards
getting pushed out if you're somebody who breaks the rules. But there's no way to prevent it in advance. It's it's like any kind of like law enforcement thing, right? Like you can't make a law and then stop stuff from happening. You just have to catch it after it happened.
Yeah, there's a joke. I remember seeing this as a cartoon, which is like a 911 operator. They're taking a phone call and they're saying something like, wait, nobody is being murdered. That's impossible. Murder is illegal, right? That's the response.
Yeah, it's against the law. So like,
it's against the law.
Obviously, it can't happen.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's the way it works. And so we're kind of entering into that trust phase.
Closing in.
Yep. But all right. Well, I guess we got to wrap it up here. We got
Stuff to do.
bugs to fix and keys to send and all that stuff. So we'll wrap it there. We'd like to thank our producers Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the podcast archives. If you haven't yet, head on over to Steam and give Crashlands 2 a wish list. Go to the App Store and pre-order, and head to Google Play and pre-register. Now, if you do all that stuff, it'll help boost the game up the charts and help it have a successful launch, and we'd appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.